Greetings, salutations to Safe to Serve International and first-time viewers. Welcome to this midday power surge, your spiritual oasis on this pilgrim journey. I'm your host, Andrew Henriques. Welcome one, welcome all to this midday power surge. Friends, we have a lot to cover today. And I want to begin by stating the following. Unless we diligently study end-time prophecies, we will not fully understand the current events that are fulfilling the signs of the times and that point to the nearness of the second coming of Jesus, the close of human probation. So I beseech you all to get back to a diligent study of the Bible. And I'm going to share with you a resource that will assist you in that regard. On this platform, if you go to the Sabbath School link, you'll find various Bible studies with actually handouts, Q&A format. Number two, I'm going to be covering today the fact that the United States of America, with its military, are doing the dirty work of the Vatican. Today, I'm going to confirm with verifiable facts that President Trump, the US, they are now fighting the Vatican's war. And Cuba is next. First, Venezuela. In a few days ago, Cuba is next. Of course, they mentioned Colombia and Mexico, but I want to focus on Cuba today. Pause right there. There's so much going on. I said to my wife, this whole scenario and chaotic scene is very fluid. If I'm not careful, I'm all over the place. And as I went into prayer, the Lord gave me a very succinct point to share with you today. And on any of these points, we can get off onto other studies. But I'm going to make sure I remain focused on this lesson today. Thirdly, I'm going to be addressing this fact that the United States of America presently is repeating the steps of ancient Babylon. Beloved, I have a question for you all, a quiz later on. And I'm going to find out who is diligently studying their Bibles. So stay tuned for that upcoming quiz at the close of this midday power surge presentation. I'm also going to cover this fact. America is being used by God to punish various nations. Yep. And this is a fulfillment of end-time Bible prophecies. Beloved, so many more themes to cover. I'll get to them once I get to them. Let's get right into it. Shall we, my friends? All right. On yesterday's midday power surge, I confirmed Trump is fighting the Vatican's war. Trump is actually doing the dirty work of the papacy. We covered that on yesterday. Notice here, my friends, this is actually a Jesuit magazine platform, Jesuitism. It's called America Magazine. Do you realize they actually confirmed what I said on yesterday? On the screen, January 5th, 2026, the headline reads, "We need what they call the Catholic just war theory now." Listen what they said in this. The warrior ethos, which means the warrior culture, promulgated by Mr. Pete Hegseth, who is that head of the Department of Defense, which he recently and others called the Department of War. Mr. Hegseth, moreover, converges with the quote-unquote holy war logic. And they go on to mention the medieval crusades. The holy war attitude is exactly what Mr. Hegseth openly and proudly promotes, as evident in his 2020 book, American Crusade, and even in his tattoos. And then they mention one tattoo that means God wills it, which he has said is the quote-unquote battle cry of the Crusades. This holy war mentality may also be reflected in the Trump administration's strikes on Islamic nations, Islamic militants, and even right now what's happening in Venezuela and what's coming for Cuba. It says it justified the means of protecting Christians, as well as in the Pentagon videos reflecting Mr. Hegseth's zeal for Christian nationalism. Beloved, on the screen are the various tattoos, confirming what a Jesuit magazine just said: America is fighting a holy war. But a holy war for who? For the Jesuits, for the Vatican, the Pope of Rome. In other words, there are Jesuits in the ears of the president, in the ears of the cabinet leaders in this administration in America, just as the modus operandi is for papists and Jesuits to become counselors to kings and princes. For what purpose? To make sure those nations become subservient to the Vatican and carry out the Vatican's aims and objectives. Let's continue. There are the tattoos of Pete Hegseth, confirming the holy war ethos. It's all there. I'm going somewhere with this, my friends. Please don't miss this. I want you all to notice here. It goes all the way back to even Roman Catholicism. Now, if you do a cursory search on the media, you'll realize Pete Hegseth does not claim to be a Roman Catholic. Yet his agenda and policies, tattoos, all spell Roman Catholicism, Jesuitism, the Inquisition, the Roman Catholic Crusades. I'm hoping, make sure my Google wasn't hacked. Brother, Google Pete Hegseth. Is he Catholic? Is he Catholic? Lest the people come and lambast yours truly. Move on from that. It's all there, my friends. It's all there. It goes back to Roman Catholicism. Look at the actual imagery on the right of the screen. That's popery. Now, friends, watch carefully here. This is the video clip of Pete Hegseth promoting his book regarding the American Crusade. We are fighting a holy war. Holy war, we are fighting the Pope's war. Clip 1 of 2.
Well, that's the whole thing. I mean, if you're in a crusade for your country, you better be unafraid. Yeah, here's a portion. Here's an excerpt from chapter 3. I'm going to start with just a little tease here.
So it's confirmed. Pete Hegseth does not openly and publicly claim to be Roman Catholic, but his policies, I just said what I just said. Move on. Here's clip 2.
America cannot and will not survive. Otherwise, our time calls for an American crusade. Yes, a holy war for the righteous cause of human freedom.
Wow.
A holy war. And beloved, notice again all the imagery Trump administration is using brings you back to the Crusades, the Inquisition. It's right there. Move on. Next. All over the military, the Department of War, the very same imagery. That's Roman Catholicism. Somebody missed it. Everybody, watch carefully. I'm going to retrace my steps. I'm going to retrace my steps here. Look at that imagery on the right of the screen. The Pope is the sovereign of the order. It's right there on the screen. Let's go forward again.
America can.
There it is. Roman Catholicism in your face. Beloved, if people don't understand end-time prophecies, they're not going to be able to make sense of the current events that are now trending. That's why Safe to Serve Local and Safe to Serve International, please share this material. Please share it so others can be awakened, enlightened, warned before it is too late. Again, I don't claim to be arrogant and braggadocious, but my friends, the news media, talking heads on mainstream media cannot connect these dots because they don't have an understanding of end time Bible prophecies. Let's continue here. Notice here, my friend, look at this video clip. It's all in your face. Just 3 times. I'll move on from that. And when I come to the close of this midday power surge, everything I just covered will make sense. This is a fulfillment of end time prophecies. Friends, I have a quiz for you. Those of you alive with me right now, stay tuned for that quiz. This is President Trump. After the ousting and removal of Nicolas Maduro there in Venezuela, President Trump said the following: "We have the greatest military in the world by far." You may read the words below. Beloved, this is a fulfillment of end time prophecies because the Bible does prophesy America will be the world's superpower, sole superpower, based on its military might. That's Revelation 13. Wake up. And Daniel chapter 11, verse 40 and verse 41. Pause. And for those of you who want a deeper study on chapter 11 of Daniel, a verse by verse study, I'll point you again to the resource. On this platform, if you go to our YouTube search bar, Prophesy Again TV, search bar, type in Sabbath School Daniel 11. Several Sabbath School studies with handouts in the description. Let's move on. Here are the words of President Trump. America's military is the most powerful in the world. And that's why I wonder, how on earth could they march into a sovereign nation, Venezuela, and just remove the president and his wife? Where was the military of Venezuela? Beloved, they were caught off guard. Not only off guard, all their sophisticated surveillance equipment were shut down. America does have a device to shut down surveillance devices in the military of nations so they can just move in, as it were, by stealth. By stealth. All right, I'll say more on that later on. President Trump, speak.
But the United States proved once again that we have the most powerful, most lethal, most sophisticated, and most fearsome. It's a fearsome military on planet Earth, and it's not even close. You know, I've been saying it for a long time. Nobody can take us. Nobody. We don't want to have it. We don't have a discussion, but you read all and you see everything else. Nobody could have done that. Nobody has our weapons. Nobody has the quality of our weapons.
Nobody, no other military in the world could have done what President Trump did. Its military, America's military, in Venezuela. None. I'm going to ask several questions throughout this midday power surge to make sure those of you alive with me stay engaged and the rest of you hereafter. What year did America's military and nation become the world's superpower? What was that year? If you don't recall the year, after what significant event, put that in the comment section. Let's move on here, my friends. Watch carefully. Beloved, this is a fulfillment of Daniel chapter 8. This is about the papacy, verse 23 through verse 25. And if you go to our platform here and type in Sabbath School Daniel 8 or Bible study Daniel 8, you see a verse by verse study of this chapter. With the handout, I can't go into all the details right now. In verse 23, you see a phrase pointing to the papacy, a king of fierce countenance. Verse 24 says, his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. What does that mean, my friends? The papacy will be working through another power, another agency, another organization, another nation. Look at verse 25. And through his policy also, he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart. That's the papacy. And by peace shall destroy many. He will also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. And that brings you back to Daniel 2. Broken without hand, that stone is the papacy in the scripture. He'll magnify himself, that's the papacy. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 1 through verse 4 is the papacy. But he will be working through another power. So friends, which nation has the world's most powerful military? It's America. America is fighting the wars of the Vatican, of the papacy. It is clear. Let's continue here, my friends. Beloved, on the screen. Now in this segment, I'm going to confirm that Cuba, Colombia, Mexico are next in the crosshairs of President Trump. On the screen, this just came out on yesterday. Headline says, Cuba's regime is now in President Trump's sights. Crosshairs, my friends. I'll come back to the tagline below that. Take a listen. Watch.
Overnight, President Trump reaffirming that the United States is in control of Venezuela after the raid that led to the capture of dictator Nicolas Maduro.
We're in charge.
Trump last night also issuing stark warnings to other countries, including Colombia.
Colombia is very sick, too, run by a sick man who likes making cocaine and selling it to the United States. And he's not going to be doing it very long, let me tell you.
So there will be an operation by the U.S. and
it sounds good to me.
And Mexico.
Mexico has to get their act together because they're pouring through Mexico, and we're going to have to do something.
The president was also asked about Cuba, where the economy has been supported by Venezuela for decades.
Stop.
Many there now fear the U.S. could take military action in Cuba as well.
Stop on Cuba. I'll come back to Cuba. You know, friends, I'm not trying to be boastful or prideful, but what if providentially God were to allow yours truly to get a hearing with President Trump, VP, J.D. Vance, and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth? What would I say to them? Among many other things, I would say, President Trump, you are fulfilling the very works of ancient Babylon. And very, very soon, what happened to ancient Babylon will happen to you and America. Yes. Imagine that. What if I were to sit with them and go through the prophecies in the Old Testament? America, your steps, your policies are fulfilling the steps of ancient Babylon. They would say, it's a mirror, a reflection of what we are now planning and what we are now doing. So, Pastor Henriques, what is the next step? They would ask. Look at this chapter. That's the end goal. And by God's grace, it's a possibility. Individuals would be able to right the ship. But as a nation, the end goal, the prophecies must be fulfilled. Beloved, Nebuchadnezzar was doing things and not knowing he was fulfilling the prophecies from God. Just as God raised up ancient Babylon to punish nations, Lord have mercy, can you see it? God is using the military, Americans' military, to punish nations. You wait until I get to that later on, but I'm simply weaving through the lesson, that golden theme and thread. Come back here. Let's talk about Cuba.
Well, Cuba's an interesting case. Cuba is, not doing very well right now. That system has not been a very good one for Cuba. The people there have suffered for many, many years. And I think Cuba is going to be something we'll end up talking about, because Cuba is a failing nation right now, very badly failing nation.
Well, I mean, I just gave you a statement a few minutes ago about, when the president speaks, you should take him seriously. Suffice it to say, Cuba is a disaster. Yeah, look, if I lived in Havana and I was in the government, I'd be concerned, at least a little bit.
Beloved, here is, and by the way, Marco Rubio, I believe, has roots in Cuba. I believe he's Cuban by heritage and lineage. Past the point, come back here. Notice now, this is the war hawk, one of them, Senator Lindsey Graham. Look at his face as he speaks about the destruction of Cuba. Watch carefully here.
And everybody in the world is thinking differently than they were just a few days ago because of what you did.
Cuba is ready to fall.
Yes.
Cuba looks like it's ready to fall. I don't know if they're going to hold out. But Cuba now has no income. They got all of their income from Venezuela, from the Venezuelan oil. They're not getting any of it. And Cuba literally is ready to fall. And you have a lot of great Cuban Americans that are going to be very happy about this.
On one hand, many of these politicians and bankers, they love war because war is profitable financially. They don't care about the devastation, destruction, and the massive death toll that will arise as a result. They don't care. It's all about the love of money. The Bible calls it the root of all evil. Let's continue here, my friends. Notice now how Lindsey Graham, one of several war hawks, is now going to state, he's lamenting Cuba is guilty of killing priests and nuns. Wait a minute. Nobody else? It confirms, again, America is doing the dirty work for the papacy, the Vatican, the Pope. Watch this, my friends.
You just wait for Cuba. Cuba is a communist dictatorship that's killed priests and nuns. They've preyed on their own people. Their days are numbered. We're going to wake up one day, I hope in 26, in our backyard, we're going to have allies in these countries doing business with America.
Beloved, it's clear. I'll come back to that. My friends, buckle your seatbelts in this segment. The Bible tells us, in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, let every word be established. Yesterday, during midday power surge, I said to you all, one main reason of several reasons why Maduro had to go. Maduro fell. One main reason is because Maduro rejected the Pope's conditions. He refused to pledge allegiance to the Pope. He refused to bow to the Pope. That was one witness I gave to you yesterday. And the facts I wrote out yesterday were so clear, even a blind man could see it. But my friends, now I'm going to give you a second witness. One primary reason why they are now saying Cuba is in the crosshairs, Cuba is next to fall, is because Cuba also duped the Vatican. Cuba hoodwinked the Pope. Cuba's leaders refused to bow to the Pope, and that's why Cuba has to fall next. That's 2 witnesses to confirm America is fighting the dirty war of the Vatican. Now, I'm itching, yes, to go to Cuba. But for those who did not see yesterday, I'll give you 3 or 4 clips to confirm Venezuela. Clip 1.
Yo le envié una carta al Papa Francisco.
Read the words.
Espero que ya esté en camino o haya llegado a Roma, al Vaticano, diciéndole que yo estoy al servicio de la causa de Cristo. Yo soy cristiano, cristiano profundo de Cristo. El Papa sabe, yo soy un practicante de la fe.
In other words, Maduro begged the Pope, please intervene. I'm at your service, please. I'm a Christian. Go back and take a look at the talking points on this. I can't get into that right now. Let's move on. Notice now, the Pope refused to assist Maduro because Maduro did not pledge allegiance to him and go along with the conditions he set forth. Clip 2.
The letter sent to Mr. Maduro, Senor Maduro, in response to his one, which is dated 7 of February 2019, of Pope Francis, in my view, is de facto a request of surrender to Maduro, because the Pope wants to be a mediator, but at his conditions, and he says Maduro with a very soft diplomatic jargon typical of the Vatican, that in the past actually Maduro didn't respect and comply with the pledges taken in past agreements. So beyond this soft language, the Pope is quite tough in saying, yes, I can be a mediator, but at my condition.
And now the Pope will call for the removal of Maduro. He called for new elections when Maduro was a sitting president. He has to go.
I remember that when Cardinal Parolin, the Secretary of State of the Vatican, tried to ask for this pledge from Maduro at the end of 2016, the inner circle of the regime was quite insulting against him. Now I think that the Pope is remembering them,
yes,
that this is not possible anymore, because this...
It's too late. You insulted the Pope. Beloved, you need to understand that. When I get to Cuba, you'll see a mirror. Watch carefully. Next, last clip, then I'll get to Cuba. Friends, stay tuned for this. All right? America is doing the dirty work of the papacy, popery.
This wouldn't be the first time the Vatican has helped Venezuela. It's a country that's 96% Catholic. Tell us what the history of the Holy See's diplomatic involvement has been.
These attempts at mediation go back to 2016. The Pope tapped 2 separate archbishops to try and sit in these discussions with the Maduro government. Venezuelan bishops were also involved, and the opposition Democratic Unity. They didn't come to concretely what the Pope and the Vatican were looking for, and the Pope actually said that in his letter. He said that they didn't follow through on what was agreed on paper. So the discussions that they had back in 2016 have been stalled, and actually there was a delegation that came from the opposition party led by the interim president Guaido just this week to the Vatican, and they walked away from that meeting with the top official of the Vatican Secretariat of State that leads these diplomatic efforts in the name of the Holy Father, and they said that the Pope they said that the Vatican was supportive of new elections.
New elections. Maduro has to go. And then we saw then Vice President Mike Pence going to see the Pope of Rome and receive his marching orders. And that's why America used its military to overthrow Maduro. 2016, first Trump presidency. 2026, the second Trump presidency. Beloved, now I'm going to get to Cuba. I want you all to take a good look at the picture on your screen. Brother, let me go double right now because I want to talk to Safe to Serve local and international and first-time viewers. I want you all to look at that. All right? This is the president of a nation. Lord, help me to drive this nail in a sure place. This is the president of a sovereign nation being ousted, dethroned as it were, and shipped off and carried to a foreign nation, his captors. Beloved, does this not remind you of Bible prophecy and Bible history? What happened to the kings of Jerusalem and Israel? Foreign leaders providentially were used by God to handcuff Zedekiah, his sons, and march them as captives to Babylon. Israel's king handcuffed as captive and marched over to Assyria. You are seeing a repetition of end time Bible history and prophecy. It is here, my friends. And that's what I want you all to see. Let me get to Cuba.
Overnight, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife touching down on U.S. soil, surrounded by federal agents. ABC News obtaining these images showing the ousted leader handcuffed on the tarmac in New York, dressed in a blue sweatshirt, sandals, and a black beanie, flanked by DEA agents.
Stop right there. The only difference is that when God allowed Babylon to take Zedekiah, his sons, and even some of Israel's children, the Bible says many times they were carried on butt naked into captivity. So, Lord have mercy. Maduro must thank the Webster for the word serendipity. He wasn't butt naked from Venezuela to the U.S. And the only difference was, back then, they didn't have airplanes. You had to walk miles as slaves, captive, from Jerusalem, Judah, down there to Babylon, or on horse ride, in wagons. These are signs of the last days, okay? Let me get to Cuba. My friends, Cuba deceived the papacy. Cuba duped the papacy. And that's why Cuba has to fall. Headline says, Cuban government announces the release of 553 prisoners through the mediation of Pope Francis. All right? And once Cuba did that, the Pope stepped in to help Cuba. Notice now, the White House, under Joe Biden, then president, removed Cuba from the terror list because of the papacy's intervention. Look at this now. This is 2025. The same day that Cuba did that, released the prisoners, the White House announced it will no longer designate Cuba as a state sponsor of terrorism. You see it now? It's clear. Why? Blue words. Because, quote, to support the Cuban people as part of an understanding with the Catholic Church under the leadership of Pope Francis. It was the Pope's intervention, mediation, that caused America to say, okay, we will remove Cuba from the blacklist of being a sponsor of terrorism. And Cuba, its part was to release the prisoners of war. But look at this now, friends.
In Cuba, emotional scenes of celebration as prisoners released by the government return home. The gradual release of 553 prisoners was announced on Tuesday, just hours after the Biden administration said it would remove Cuba from its list of state sponsors of terrorism as part of a deal brokered with the Vatican.
It's clear. Beloved, do you know what happened next? Look at the headline, New York Times. Freed Cuban dissident. The church and Biden got duped. Mercy. Hoodwinked. Deceived by the Cuban leaders. The current president, and Raul Castro, who is in the background. You know, he's also akin to Fidel Castro in the background. And Raul is still alive today. Deceived the Pope. Do you know what happened next? As soon as President Trump was inaugurated, he put Cuba back on the blacklist. The terror list. It's on the screen right there, my friends. It's on the screen. It's on the screen right there. Cuba began to rearrest, those that they once released. And when Trump saw that, when the Pope saw that, just imagine the telegram that was sent from upstairs. Just imagine somebody actually send Trump a message. You know what to do now. You know what to do now. Their days are numbered. No wonder the war hawk, Lindsey Graham, said their days are numbered, Cuba. You can't betray the Pope. Blue words at the bottom. Cuba betrayed the Pope. It's right there, underlined blue. That's it. And the present president, his name is Miguel Diaz-Canel. Yeah, with Raul Castro in the background. It's right there, my friends. It's right there. Betrayed the Pope and the Catholic Church. And even now, this is Pope Leo XIV. Under Pope Leo XIV's administration, his papacy, the president of Cuba still continued to spit in the face of the Pope. Look at the screen. Another prisoner, a woman this time, was rearrested by the Cuban governor, the Cuban government. And she was once released in the number of the 553. Go back to prison, said Cuba's government. But I thought that was one of the conditions the popes both told you to do. And we will protect you, preserve you. And since you reneged on your part of the agreement, America, you know what to do now. America, you know what to do now. Look at it, my friends. It's right there now. Biden's decision was quickly reversed by President Trump on January 20. Mercy, 2025. That's it. America is fighting. It's clear now. The battles of the papacy. America is doing the dirty work of the Vatican. Two witnesses. Venezuela refused to bow. And Cuba refused to bow. Let's move on. It's right there, my friends. And what happened now? There it is. Trump returned Cuba on the blacklist for state sponsors of terrorism. Not only that, watch carefully here, my friends. First sentence on top, red words. The U.S. announced its first sanctions on the Cuban president, Miguel Diaz-Canel. My friends, think about that. What is an actual sanction? It is a siege. A siege. And the only nation that was supporting and propping up Cuba was Venezuela. I will now play the clip. The only nation that was propping up Cuba in that region was Venezuela. And Venezuela has now fallen. And that's why Cuba is next. Here it is, my friends. Watch carefully. When you slap a sanction on Cuba, it is a political siege and an economic siege. It's right there in red words. Here's the clip.
And everybody in the world is thinking differently than they were just a few days ago because of what you did.
Cuba is ready to fall.
You know? Yes.
Cuba looks like it's ready to fall. I don't know if they're going to hold out. But Cuba now has no income. They got all of their income from Venezuela, from the Venezuelan oil. They're not getting any of it. And Cuba literally is ready to fall. And you have a lot of great Cuban Americans that are going to be very happy about this.
Very clear. Everything I just said has been confirmed. America is doing the dirty work of the Vatican. Beloved, yesterday I was itching, as it were, colloquially speaking, to drive home this theme, and I'm not going to allow today to make me neglect this. Beloved, when you spit in the face of the Vatican, when you say, I will and do not, yes, I will, but don't follow through, you'll be severely punished. Look at the screen. Revelation 13, verse 3 and verse 4. What is said of the papacy? It says, when the deadly wound of the papacy begins to be healed, its process, all the world will wander after the beast. And verse 4 says, who is like unto the beast, who is able to make war with him? When he says jump, you say how high. When he said go, you go, or else. Do, you must do, or else. Come, you come, or else. Who is able to make war with him? We are here, my friends. And notice, this confirms the deadly wound of the papacy is being healed. And verse number 4 says, once the deadly wound is completely healed, it's connected to false worship. Verse 4, and they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. The beast is the papacy. So if you worship the dragon, and the dragon gives authority and power to the beast, so the same worship that goes for the dragon also goes for the beast. That's the mark of the beast crisis. It's clear for those who want to see it, my friends. Beloved, I want you all to watch this.
But the United States...
I want you all to watch this. And based on history, in 1798, the papacy lost temporal dominion. She lost the power to use the military might of nations to overthrow every opposition, political opposition and religious opposition. So the deadly wound being healed must consist of the papacy regaining military might, to use it to do what she did between 538 and 1798. And since the Bible says the papacy will again rule the whole world, that means she must hijack, she must control the military that is the world's superpower. Which one is it? Let Trump tell you. Revelation 13, America forms an image to the papacy. America heals her wound. Hear it from the mouth of the horse.
But the United States proved once again that we have the most powerful, most lethal, most sophisticated, and most fearsome. It's a fearsome military on planet Earth, and it's not even close. You know, I've been saying it for a long time. Nobody can take us. Nobody. We don't want to have it. We don't have a discussion, but you read all and you see everything else. Nobody could have done that. Nobody has our weapons. Nobody has the quality of our weapons.
Fierce countenance. That's Daniel chapter 8, which I covered earlier, verse 23 to verse 25. Fierce countenance, and by peace shall they destroy many. Beloved, please, those of you alive right now, write down that statement. By peace shall they destroy many, a king with fierce countenance. And the papacy will work through another nation. That's Daniel 8, verse 23 to verse 25. Here is Trump and Pete Hegseth, the Department of War. By peace, destroy many. Pete Hegseth.
Good morning and welcome to the War Department. Because the era of the Department of Defense is over. It captures a simple yet profound truth. To ensure peace, we must prepare for war. From this moment forward, the only mission of the newly restored Department of War is this: warfighting, preparing for war and preparing to win, unrelenting and uncompromising in that pursuit.
Mercy.
You just wait for Cuba. Cuba is a communist dictatorship that's killed priests and nuns. They've preyed on their own people. Their days are numbered. We're going to wake up one day, I hope in 26, in our backyard, we're going to have allies in these countries doing business with America.
Lindsey Graham, I have breaking news. Based on what America is now doing, 2 points, based on what America and its military are now doing, America's days are also numbered. I'm going to prove that in short order in a few moments. Let's come back here. Notice, what title is given to Cuba? Communist regime. Those of you alive in the comment section, what prophecy in the Bible is being fulfilled when you see America uniting with the Vatican to overthrow a communist country? What is that prophecy? Come on, talk to me in the comment section. What is that prophecy? Beloved, it is Daniel chapter 11, verse 40 through verse 45. And that's why, again, I'll point you to the resource. Stay on this platform. Go to the search bar, type in Sabbath School or Bible Study, and put Daniel 11. Several videos will pop up. Click on any one. It's a verse-by-verse study. Also, you'll find handouts, Q&A format. The prophecies are being fulfilled. And what event showed publicly the union between America and the Vatican, and America doing the dirty work of the Vatican to overthrow a communist empire. It was 1989, the end of the Cold War. On one side, you have the former Soviet Union. I cannot go in depth. I'm simply going to wrap this up in a nice bow. Stay tuned for it. On one side, in the red corner, the red scare, in the red corner, communism, USSR. In the blue, in the purple corner, you'll get that if you study Revelation chapter 17, verse 3 through verse 5. In the red corner, in the purple corner, you have the Vatican and Ronald Reagan of America. That's it. And they overthrew communism. Here is why, my friends. Here is why. Because in 1798, it was the principle of communism that overthrew the papacy. She lost her temporal dominion. You might ask, what is that principle of communism? Remember, communism is state-sponsored atheism. That's communism. And in France, in the 1780s and 1790s, they had state-sponsored atheism. Atheistic France. So when you see in 1989, America being used to overthrow communist regime. As a matter of fact, look at the Time magazine article here. I want a sentence. Beloved, look at the red words. Time magazine labeled Mikhail Gorbachev, the czar of world atheism. Red words. What's a czar? Czar means king. That's Daniel chapter 11, verse 40. The king of the south. Atheism. The czar of world atheism. Against the so-called vicar of Christ, the king of the north. Christ is the true king of the north. The papacy is the counterfeit. Let me move on here, friends. That's for another day. I'm going somewhere with this. Listen what it says. Communism battered against the immovable object of Christianity. Time magazine. Listen.
Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate.
Listen.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
All right. And that happened in the year 1989. And Gorbachev said, the Berlin Wall, listen to me. Now I'm going to give you another prophecy which was fulfilled right here. When America and the Vatican united to overthrow the former Soviet Union, it was in that year, 1989, America became the world's superpower, sole only superpower. She then controlled the world, and Trump just confirmed it. Let's move on. But who was the one behind the scenes? Gorbachev said the Iron Curtain, yes, the USSR would not have fallen if it wasn't for John Paul II, the apostate church. Go look at 1 Kings 21. It was Jezebel behind the scenes that caused Ahab, the king, to control a well sought after vineyard, territory, dominion. But nobody knew it was Jezebel behind the scenes, because Jezebel wrote in the king's name and sealed the death decree to kill Naboth in the king's stamp. Nobody knew Jezebel was behind the scenes. So as you're seeing America overthrowing Venezuela, nobody knows who is behind the scenes. America says Cuba is next. Nobody knows. The papacy is behind the scenes. And then Iran is next. Muslim nations are next. Nobody knows that Jezebel, the papacy, is behind the scenes. That's a study for another day. Let's continue here, my friends. There it is. I want you all to note this now. It was America doing her dirty work. Okay, friends? Okay. In volume 9, page 14, it confirms what you're now seeing. On the screen, it says Castro in Cuba had expelled the Jesuits from Cuba. It's payback. So as long as Cuba went along with the agenda of the papacy, Cuba would stand with its current leadership. But when his name is Cuba's president, his name is not Raul. Anyway, I believe it's Canel. I believe that last name is. When he spat in the face of Pope Francis and spat in the face of Pope Leo XIV, all protection has been removed. And now Cuba is in the crosshairs. That's where we are right now. Volume 9, page 14 says, the world is stirred with the spirit of war. The prophecy of the 11th chapter of Daniel has nearly reached its complete fulfillment. What prophecy? Daniel 11. Soon the scenes of trouble spoken of in the prophecies will take place. That's chapter 11 of Daniel, verse 40 through verse 45 into Daniel 12 and verse 1. We are here, my friends. Now, here comes the quiz. Those of you alive with me right now, I want to ask you a simple biblical question. Let me see who can answer it. My friends, what was Babylon doing just before Babylon fell? What was Babylon doing just before the Lord pronounced that Babylon would fall? I wonder who will catch this. And if you were listening, my friends, the answer was given throughout this midday power surge. Who can confirm? What was Babylon doing just before God pronounced Babylon would fall? All right, look at the chat. Partying, eating and drinking. Look at the comment section. Drinking and making merry. Being arrogant, feasting, revelry. I knew you all would say that. I knew you all would say that. Celebrating. What else? Fornicating. Beloved, yes, merrymaking, idleness. My friends, that is correct. But I'm going to share with you a great epiphany from God, a great revelation, everybody. I want you all to go to Jeremiah 27 and put down verse 6 through verse 8. And normally, I'll tell you what to look for before I read the scripture. Before Babylon, ancient Babylon fell, God said, providentially, I am going to use, Lord help me to nail this, I am going to use the military prowess of Babylon to overthrow all nations. All nations will be brought under the yoke of Nebuchadnezzar, the yoke of Babylon. And once they do that, that is fulfilling my will. And then Babylon itself will fall. So when America is conquering all these nations, overthrowing all these leaders of these nations, it's a sign of end-time prophecy. That's why I say I'm not braggadocious this afternoon. I'm not being arrogant, but mainstream media, the talking heads, can't connect these dots. They can't. Where is it? They can't. Look at the screen. This came out yesterday. Headline and the tagline, Cuba's regime is now in Trump's sights. Excited Cuban exiles are comparing the capture of Nicolas Maduro to the fall of the Berlin Wall. Historically, what happened? Nation after nation began to fall, and they had to come under the governance, the policy of the West. Jeremiah 27, my friends. Martin Luther once said, playtime is over, the reformer. Verse 6, I was wondering, should I put this on a slideshow in my keynote? I'm going to read it from the Bible. Verse 6, the Bible says, Jeremiah speaking on behalf of the Lord. Verse 6 says, and now have I given all these lands into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, my servant. My servant. And the beasts of the field have I given him also to serve him. The beast, that's nations. Look at verse 7. And all nations shall serve Babylon, and his son, and his son's son, until the very time of his land come. And then many nations and great kings shall serve themselves of him. Verse 8, and it shall come to pass that the nation and the kingdom which shall not serve the same Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and that will not put their neck under the yoke of the king of Babylon, that nation will I punish, saith the Lord, with the sword, that's military, famine, that's an economic sanction, a siege, with pestilence, disease, until I have consumed them by his hand. Very clear. Safe to serve local and international First Step viewers. Please share this with others. I'll give you another. Jeremiah 25. Look at verse 9 and see what it says now in verse 9. Behold, I will send and take all the families of the north, saith the Lord, and Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, my servant, and will bring them against this land, and against the inhabitants thereof, and against these nations round about, will utterly destroy them, and make them an astonishment, etc. Verse 11, and the whole land shall be a desolation and an astonishment, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years. Stop right there. These nations will come under the yoke of Babylon. Imperialism. What's a yoke? Have you ever seen a yoke for cattle, oxen? A yoke can be modified as a handcuff, right? A shackle. In what were Madura's hands placed in? Handcuffs, shackles, a yoke. Continue, verse 12. So when Babylon does that, look at verse 12 now. The same prophecy, verse 12. And it shall come to pass when 70 years are accomplished that I, the God of creation, will punish the king of Babylon and that nation, saith the Lord, for their iniquity, and the land of the Chaldeans will I make a perpetual desolation. That's clear, my friends. The last scripture. Lord, thank you for allowing me to put this nail in a sure place. Now, this last scripture, it connects with Revelation 18, which is, my friends, the final message to a dying church and a dying world. In Jeremiah 51, verse 7 says, Babylon hath been a golden cup in the Lord's hand, that made all the earth drunken. What? Drunken. Don't forget that. The nations have drunken of her wine. Therefore the nations are mad. Verse 8, Babylon is suddenly fallen. All right. And Trump is saying, Cuba is falling and will fall. Lindsey Graham, it will fall. Days are numbered. That's why I would say to Trump, J.D. Vance, Lindsey Graham, Pete Hegseth, Kevin Roberts, your days are numbered. Babylon is falling. Howl for her. Take balm for her, if so that she may be healed. Verse 9, we would have healed Babylon, but she is not healed. Forsake Babylon. Let us go out of Babylon. What text is that? In Revelation, those who are alive, what text is that? Flee Babylon. Look carefully now, verse 9, for her judgment reaches unto heaven. Her judgment doth reach to heaven? Babylon is fallen? She makes people drunk? Flee. That's Revelation chapter 18, verse 2 through verse 4. And verse 5 says, her sins have reached unto heaven. What a clear study, my friends. That's why when I see in comment sections under my videos, what Pastor Henriques is talking about and preaching and sharing is not prophecy. Those people are arrogantly ignorant. Once Babylon began to capture nations, overthrow leaders of nations, the same prophecy that predicted that also said, Babylon, your time is coming. So God used iniquitous Babylon to punish nations whose probation had closed because the leaders and people were unrepentant. And then God turned around and punished Babylon, its leaders and people, because they were wicked. They were promoting iniquities. They were enslaving God's people. They were promoting false worship. They were unrepentant, so their judgment also came. Revelation chapter 18. Yes, my friend. Let's nail it. Verse number 2, Babylon is fallen, liquor, wine. Verse number 4, come out of her. Verse 5, her sins and iniquities have reached unto heaven. Verse number 6, her judgment is coming. Verse number 8, her plagues come in one day. One day. Notice what plagues? Famine and hunger. Why? It's payback. So what she did to others, God will do to her. Is that not Jeremiah, the text I read? What will ancient Babylon do to nations? Bring famine upon them, pestilence upon them. What a clear scripture. The last days we're living in. Look at my time. Beloved, I need to get to Iran. I need to get to Iran. Preacher man, back on the screen. Beloved, that means we're seeing a repetition of the fall of ancient Babylon. America, the Vatican, the papacy, apostate Protestantism is about to fall. Babylon is falling as the Berlin Wall fell. One more time, preacher. Give it to them.
Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
And then America will fall. Babylon will fall. Beloved, I want to hear what point stood out to you today. 689-777-5198. Give me a quote here, preacher. 689-777-5198. Call in and tell me what points stood out to you today. Once you see this, the next war is going to be against God's people, my friends. Against God's people. And that's why it's time to implement the 5 keys of survival. So God can protect us and God can provide for us in the coming crisis that is going to be as severe as we've never seen upon this earth. Great Controversy, page 589 confirms.